Get your hands off me! Rebecca's scream echoed through Sterling and Associates jewelry as she hit the marble floor. The words hung in the air like shattered glass, cutting through the elegant silence of the upscale jewelry store. Rebecca Matthews had never imagined her life would unravel in such a public, devastating way. One moment she was examining a diamond bracelet, 8 months pregnant and glowing with what she thought was happiness. The next she was sprawled across cold marble while her millionaire husband towered over her, his face twisted with rage. But let me start from the beginning, from the moment everything changed. This one is absolutely stunning, Eleanor Stone had said, her refined voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 30 years curating luxury jewelry. The store owner was a woman of understated elegance, her silver hair perfectly styled, her navy suit impeccable. She placed the diamond bracelet on the black velvet display pad with reverent care. The customer who ordered this has exquisite taste. Rebecca Matthews shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her 8-month pregnant belly making even sitting a challenge. She reached for the bracelet with genuine curiosity, her interior designer's eye immediately appreciating the delicate craftsmanship. The diamonds caught the store's carefully positioned lighting, creating tiny rainbows across her palm. "It's beautiful," Rebecca murmured, turning the bracelet to catch different angles of light. "Jonathan, look at this detail work." Her husband stood beside her, but something was wrong. Jonathan Matthews, usually confident to the point of arrogance, was checking his phone constantly. His jaw was clenched, and a thin sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead, despite the store's perfect climate control. "Yes, lovely," he said without looking, his voice tight. "Perhaps we should focus on what we came for, Rebecca. The baby's nursery needs those custom picture frames, remember?" Rebecca frowned. Jonathan had been the one to suggest stopping at Sterling and Associates. He'd claimed he wanted to surprise her with something special before their daughter arrived. Now he seemed desperate to leave. Eleanor Stone's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I assumed you were here about the bracelet pickup. Mr. Matthews, isn't this what you've been waiting for?" The color drained from Jonathan's face. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding at all," Eleanor replied, consulting her leather appointment book. "You've called 3 times this week asking if it was ready. The engraving came out perfectly, just as you requested." Rebecca looked between her husband and the store owner, sensing an undercurrent she didn't understand. "Engraving? What engraving?" Eleanor Stone, oblivious to the mounting tension, smiled warmly. "Would you like to see it? The inscription is on the inside. Very romantic." She gently opened the bracelet's hidden clasp, revealing delicate script engraved inside. Rebecca leaned forward, her heart beginning to race for reasons she couldn't name. The words seemed to blur for a moment before coming into sharp, devastating focus. "Forever yours, V." The air left her lungs in a rush. "V?" she whispered, looking up at Jonathan. "Who is V?" Jonathan's facade cracked completely. His face went from pale to flushed, his hands clenching into fists. "Rebecca, let's discuss this at home." "No." Rebecca's voice was stronger now, fueled by a growing certainty that her world was built on lies. "Who is V, Jonathan? This bracelet costs more than most people make in a year. Who is V?" Eleanor Stone's expression shifted from confusion to concern as she realized she had stepped into something ugly. She reached discreetly for the silent alarm button beneath her desk. "It's not what you think," Jonathan said, the words every betrayed spouse dreads hearing. "Rebecca, you're being dramatic. Your pregnancy hormones." "Don't you dare blame my pregnancy," Rebecca interrupted, her voice rising. Other customers in the store were beginning to stare. "This bracelet was meant for another woman. You've been here multiple times. You had jewelry engraved for someone called V, while I've been carrying your child." Jonathan's mask slipped entirely. The charming tech company CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms and commanded respect, was gone. In his place stood someone Rebecca had never seen before. Someone dangerous. "You want to know who V is?" he snarled, his voice low and vicious. "Valerie Cooper is everything you're not. She's young, she's beautiful, and she doesn't spend my money on nursery decorations for a baby I never wanted." The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. Around them, the jewelry store had gone completely silent except for the soft classical music still playing through hidden speakers. "Never wanted? Rebecca's hand instinctively moved to her belly. Jonathan, what are you saying? I'm saying you trapped me, he continued, his voice growing louder, his control completely gone. You and this pregnancy and your constant needs. Valerie understands that a man like me has requirements. She appreciates what I provide instead of constantly demanding more. Eleanor Stone's finger hovered over the panic button as she watched this private argument become a public breakdown. Rebecca struggled to stand, her pregnant body making quick movements impossible. 8 months, she whispered. I've been pregnant for 8 months, and you've been with her the entire time? And she's half your age, Jonathan added with cruel precision, and twice as grateful. The devastation on Rebecca's face seemed to fuel his anger rather than soften it. Years of resentment poured out in the elegant jewelry store. Jonathan, please, Rebecca said, reaching for his arm. Can we just go home and talk about this? Please think about our daughter. Don't touch me, he snapped, jerking his arm away with such force that Rebecca stumbled backward. Her pregnant body couldn't compensate for the sudden movement. She felt herself falling, her hands reaching out instinctively to break her fall and protect her unborn child. Get your hands off me, she screamed as she hit the marble floor. The sound of her body striking the stone echoed through the store like a gunshot. Rebecca lay there for a moment, her hands pressed protectively against her belly, staring up at the man she thought she knew. Jonathan stood over her, his chest heaving, his face a mask of rage and panic. For a moment he seemed to realize what he had done. His eyes darted around the store, taking in the shocked faces of customers and staff, the security cameras, the undeniable reality of what had just occurred. Eleanor Stone was already moving, her finger pressing the silent alarm as she rushed to Rebecca's side. Don't move, dear, she said firmly. Help is coming. Other customers had their phones out, some calling 911, others recording. The age of social media meant Jonathan's assault on his pregnant wife would be documented from multiple angles. She slipped, Jonathan said loudly, his voice carrying the authority he was accustomed to wielding. My wife slipped. She's been clumsy throughout her pregnancy. That's not what happened, Eleanor Stone said firmly, kneeling beside Rebecca. I saw exactly what happened, young man, and it was not a slip. Rebecca struggled to process what had just occurred. The man she had loved, the father of her unborn child, had just shoved her to the ground in a jealous rage. The pain in her back was nothing compared to the shattering of everything she thought she knew about her life. The baby, she whispered to Eleanor. Is the baby okay? Eleanor's experienced hands gently helped Rebecca into a more comfortable position. We're going to make sure both of you are fine, dear. The ambulance is coming. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder with each passing moment. Jonathan's perfect life, built on lies and control, was about to crumble in the most public way possible. This is a misunderstanding, he said desperately, his phone already in his hand, likely calling his lawyer. Rebecca fell. She's always been dramatic, especially during this pregnancy. But Eleanor Stone's steady gaze never wavered. Sir, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've seen men lie to their wives, I've seen affairs unfold in my store, and I've seen domestic violence. What I just witnessed was assault, plain and simple. Rebecca closed her eyes, her hands still protectively cradling her belly. She realized with crystalline clarity that this moment, horrible as it was, might be the first honest moment in her marriage. Everything else had been performance, manipulation, lies wrapped in expensive gifts, and empty promises. The sirens grew louder, and Rebecca knew that when they stopped, her old life would be over. The question was, what would she build from the wreckage? Rebecca lay on the cold marble floor of Sterling & Associates jewelry, her world reduced to the immediate concerns of her unborn daughter and the shocking reality of what her millionaire husband had just done. The elegant store, with its carefully curated displays of luxury and love, had become a crime scene. Eleanor Stone knelt beside her, one hand on Rebecca's shoulder, the other firmly gripping her cell phone. The paramedics are 2 minutes away, dear, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Just breathe. Everything is going to be all right. But Rebecca could see Jonathan pacing like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used when trying to control business situations. Michael, I need you at Sterling & Associates Jewelry immediately, he was saying to what Rebecca assumed was his lawyer. There's been an incident. My wife fell, she's pregnant, and these people are making it sound like something it wasn't. That's not what happened, Eleanor said loudly enough for everyone in the store to hear. This man pushed his pregnant wife, and she fell. I saw it with my own eyes. Other customers had gathered at a respectful distance, their faces showing a mixture of concern for Rebecca and disgust at what they had witnessed. A young woman with short blonde hair was openly recording with her phone. "Ma'am, please don't record this," Jonathan said, his voice taking on the commanding tone that usually made people comply. "This is a private family matter." "Domestic violence isn't private," the woman replied firmly, not lowering her phone. "And this is a public place." Rebecca watched this exchange with a strange sense of detachment. She had spent 3 years married to Jonathan Matthews, believing she knew the man she had pledged her life to. The successful tech company CEO, the millionaire who had swept her off her feet, the man who had promised her everything she had ever dreamed of. Now she realized she had been living with a stranger. "Rebecca," Jonathan said, crouching down beside her, his voice suddenly soft and concerned. "Honey, you need to tell them you slipped. You know how clumsy you've been lately. Remember last week when you tripped over the coffee table?" The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that Rebecca wondered how many times he had rewritten reality for her before. How many times had she accepted his version of events because it was easier than facing the truth? "I didn't slip," Rebecca said quietly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You pushed me, Jonathan. You found out I discovered your affair, and you pushed me." Jonathan's mask of concern cracked slightly. "You're confused, sweetheart. The shock of the fall—" "I'm not confused," Rebecca interrupted, her hand moving to the diamond bracelet that had started this whole nightmare. Eleanor had placed it carefully beside her, the evidence of Jonathan's betrayal sparkling under the store's lights. "Forever yours, V. Who is she, Jonathan? Who is Valerie?" The sirens had grown much louder now, and through the store's large windows, Rebecca could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles pulling up outside. Jonathan's face went completely white. "How do you know her name?" "You said it," Rebecca replied, her memory of the last few minutes becoming clearer despite her shock. "You said Valerie Cooper is everything I'm not. You said she's young and beautiful and grateful for what you provide." Eleanor Stone's eyebrows rose sharply. She had been in the luxury jewelry business long enough to recognize the signs of a man maintaining two separate lives. "Mr. Matthews, how many times have you been in my store in the past 6 months?" "I don't see how that's relevant," Jonathan snapped. "5 times, Eleanor said firmly. 5 times in the past 6 months. Always alone, always nervous, always asking about custom pieces. Never once did you mention having a pregnant wife at home." The paramedics burst through the store's front door, their equipment bags and confident movements bringing a sense of relief to everyone except Jonathan. "Ma'am, I'm Sarah. I'm a paramedic," a woman in her 30s said, kneeling beside Rebecca. "Can you tell me your name and what happened?" "Rebecca Matthews," Rebecca said, her voice stronger now. "I'm 8 months pregnant, and my husband pushed me. I fell backward and hit the floor." Sarah's expression became immediately more serious. "Any pain? Any cramping? Any fluid leakage?" "My back hurts where I hit the floor," Rebecca said, "but I don't think the baby is hurt. She's been moving normally." "We're going to take excellent care of both of you," Sarah assured her. "Sir, are you the husband?" Jonathan stepped forward, his charm switching back on like a light. "Yes, I'm Jonathan Matthews. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. My wife slipped, and now she's confused." "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back," Sarah said firmly. "Ma'am, what's your version of what happened?" Rebecca took a deep breath, realizing this was the moment that would define everything that came next. She could protect Jonathan, as she had been trained to do throughout their marriage. She could minimize the incident, accept his version of reality, and maintain the comfortable lies that had been her life. Or she could tell the truth. "I was looking at a diamond bracelet that my husband had ordered for another woman," Rebecca said clearly. "When I confronted him about his affair, he became angry and pushed me. I fell backward and hit the floor." Sarah nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Any witnesses?" "I witnessed the entire incident," Eleanor Stone said firmly. "This man assaulted his pregnant wife in my store. There was no slip, no accident. He pushed her in anger." Jonathan's face was becoming increasingly red. This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? I'm the CEO of Matthews Tech Solutions. I would never hurt my wife. These women are being dramatic. Sir, I need you to lower your voice and step back, Sarah said, her tone becoming more authoritative. We're going to transport your wife to the hospital for evaluation. That's not necessary, Jonathan said quickly. She's fine. We can handle this privately. Mr. Matthews, Eleanor Stone interjected, the police are also coming. I pressed the silent alarm when you became aggressive with your wife. If possible, Jonathan's face went even whiter. You called the police? For a domestic misunderstanding? I called the police because I witnessed domestic violence, Eleanor replied firmly. Rebecca watched her husband's reaction with growing clarity. This wasn't shock at a misunderstanding being blown out of proportion. This was panic at being caught. This was the reaction of a man who knew exactly what he had done and was terrified of the consequences. The paramedics were preparing to move her to a stretcher when police officers entered the store. The lead officer was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and the bearing of someone who had seen everything. I'm Detective Patricia Hall, she announced. I understand there was an incident here involving domestic violence. There was no domestic violence, Jonathan said immediately, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used in business. My pregnant wife slipped and fell. These people are making it into something it's not. Detective Hall's experienced eyes took in the scene. The pregnant woman on the floor, the expensive bracelet with another woman's initial, the husband's defensive posture, and the store owner's firm stance. Ma'am, she said to Eleanor, can you tell me what you witnessed? Eleanor Stone straightened to her full height, every inch the successful businesswoman she was. I witnessed this man become verbally abusive toward his pregnant wife when she discovered he had purchased expensive jewelry for another woman. When she confronted him, he pushed her, causing her to fall backward onto the marble floor. That's not what happened, Jonathan protested. Sir, I'll get your statement in a moment, Detective Hall said firmly. Ma'am, on the floor, can you tell me your name and what occurred from your perspective? Rebecca looked up at the detective, then at the paramedics waiting to help her, then at Eleanor Stone, who had become an unexpected ally, and finally at Jonathan, whose mask had completely slipped. My name is Rebecca Matthews, she said clearly. My husband Jonathan pushed me down when I confronted him about buying jewelry for his mistress. I'm 8 months pregnant, and I fell hard on my back. Detective Hall nodded, making notes. Any injuries beyond the fall? My back hurts, but I think the baby is okay, Rebecca said. The paramedics want to take me to the hospital for evaluation. That's a good idea, Detective Hall agreed. We'll continue this conversation there. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me to answer some questions. Jonathan's panic was becoming more visible by the moment. I want to call my lawyer. That's your right, Detective Hall said calmly. But first, we're going to make sure your wife and unborn child receive proper medical care, and we're going to document what happened here today. As the paramedics carefully moved Rebecca to the stretcher, she caught Eleanor Stone's eye. Thank you, she whispered. You did the right thing by telling the truth, dear, Eleanor replied softly. And this isn't over. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here today. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, Rebecca caught a glimpse of the diamond bracelet still lying on the black velvet cloth. Forever yours, V, the evidence of her husband's betrayal and the catalyst for his violence. She realized with startling clarity that this might be the worst day of her life, but it might also be the beginning of the first honest chapter she had ever lived. The ambulance doors closed, and as they pulled away from Sterling and Associates jewelry, Rebecca could see Jonathan in the back of a police car, his phone pressed to his ear, no doubt calling in favors and lawyers and whatever influence his money could buy. But for the first time in years, Rebecca wasn't afraid of his anger. She was afraid of something else entirely, what she might discover when she started looking for the truth about the man she had married. The emergency room at Metropolitan General Hospital buzzed with controlled urgency, but Rebecca Matthews felt strangely calm despite everything that had happened. Perhaps it was shock, or perhaps it was the relief of finally being somewhere. Jonathan couldn't control the narrative. Dr. Amanda Foster, her obstetrician, arrived within the hour, her face showing concern mixed with professional determination. Rebecca, I came as soon as I heard. How are you feeling? How's our little girl? She's been moving normally, Rebecca said, her hand resting on her belly. My back hurts where I hit the floor, but I think she's okay. Dr. Foster's examination was thorough and gentle. At 45, she had delivered hundreds of babies and had unfortunately seen too many cases where pregnancy made women more vulnerable to domestic violence rather than more protected. The baby's heartbeat is strong and regular, Dr. Foster said after using the portable ultrasound machine. She seems completely unaffected by the trauma. But Rebecca, we need to talk about the bruising on your back and what happened today. Rebecca had been avoiding mirrors, but Dr. Foster showed her the photographs the hospital was required to take for documentation. The bruising across her lower back was already darkening, a stark visual reminder of how hard she had hit the marble floor. This could have been much worse, Dr. Foster said gently. A fall at 8 months pregnant can cause placental abruption, premature labor, or serious injury to both mother and baby. You were very lucky. Detective Patricia Hall knocked on the doorframe, waiting for permission to enter. Mrs. Matthews, I have some follow-up questions when you're ready, and there's someone here who wants to see you. Behind Detective Hall stood Sarah Collins, Rebecca's best friend from college, and now a successful divorce attorney. Sarah's dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression showed the kind of controlled fury that made her formidable in courtrooms. Rebecca, Sarah said, moving immediately to her friend's bedside, I came as soon as I heard. Are you and the baby all right? We're okay, Rebecca said, feeling tears threaten for the first time since the incident. Sarah, I don't understand what's happening. Everything I thought I knew about my life was wrong. Sarah took Rebecca's hand firmly. We're going to figure this out together. But first, Detective Hall has some information you need to hear. Detective Hall consulted her notebook. Mrs. Matthews, we've been investigating your husband's activities, and there are some things you should know. The bracelet at the jewelry store was purchased 3 weeks ago for $8,000. According to the store's records, your husband has made several expensive purchases there over the past 6 months, all for someone with the initial V. Rebecca felt her stomach drop. How many purchases? 4 separate occasions, Detective Hall replied, totaling nearly $25,000, all paid for with a credit card that appears to be linked to your joint accounts. Sarah's expression darkened. He's been using marital assets to buy gifts for his mistress. Rebecca, this is financial infidelity on top of everything else. Dr. Foster quietly finished her examination and updated Rebecca's chart. I'm going to give you some privacy, she said, but Rebecca, I want you to stay overnight for observation. Given the trauma and the late stage of pregnancy, it's the safest choice. After Dr. Foster left, Detective Hall continued with her report. We've identified the woman as Valerie Cooper, 26 years old, marketing executive at Titan Digital Solutions. That's Jonathan's biggest competitor, Rebecca said, the pieces starting to fit together in ways that made her feel sick. He's been sharing business information with her, hasn't he? That's a possibility we're investigating, Detective Hall confirmed. Mrs. Matthews, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has your husband ever been physically aggressive with you before today? Rebecca started to automatically say no, then stopped. Sarah squeezed her hand encouragingly. Not like today, Rebecca said slowly, but there have been times. He grabs my arm too hard when he's angry. He shoved past me in ways that seemed accidentally aggressive. Once he threw a glass against the wall during an argument, and the pieces cut my hand. How did he react when you got cut? Detective Hall asked. Rebecca's face crumpled as she remembered. He said I should have moved faster, that it was my fault for standing too close. He made me clean up the glass while he went to his office to work. Sarah muttered something under her breath that sounded distinctly unprofessional. Mrs. Matthews, Detective Hall continued, we're going to proceed with assault charges against your husband. The evidence is strong. We have witness testimony from Mrs. Stone, security camera footage from the jewelry store, your medical documentation, and the clear motive established by his affair. What happens now? Rebecca asked. He'll be processed and likely released on bail, Detective Hall explained, but we'll be requesting a restraining order to keep him away from you. You should also know that his lawyer has already been to the station, Michael Crawford from Crawford, Pierce and Associates. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Crawford's the best criminal defense attorney in the city. That's not a lawyer you call for a misunderstanding. That's who you call when you know you're in serious trouble. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Sarah, I need to ask you something as my friend, not as a lawyer. Is my marriage over? Sarah's expression softened. Honey, your marriage was probably over the moment he decided to have an affair. Today just made it impossible to pretend otherwise. Detective Hall's phone buzzed and she checked the message. Mrs. Matthews, I'm afraid there's more. We've been in contact with Valerie Cooper and she's agreed to speak with us. She confirmed the affair, but there's something else you need to know. Rebecca braced herself. What? She's also pregnant. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She felt as though all the air had been sucked out of the room. What? 3 months along, Detective Hall said gently. She claims your husband promised to leave you after the baby was born. She had no idea he was violent. Sarah's face was hard as stone. Rebecca, this changes everything. He's been planning to abandon you and your daughter while starting a new family with his mistress, using your money to finance it. Rebecca closed her eyes, trying to process the sheer scope of Jonathan's betrayal. Not only had he been unfaithful throughout her pregnancy, but he had been planning to abandon her while secretly preparing to become a father again with someone else. There's more, Detective Hall continued reluctantly. Financial records show that your husband has been transferring money to accounts you likely don't know about. We're talking significant amounts, Mrs. Matthews. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's impossible, Rebecca said weakly. I manage our household finances. I would have noticed. Sarah was already pulling out her phone. What accounts do you have access to, Rebecca? Walk me through your financial setup. As Rebecca described their banking arrangements, the full picture of her financial vulnerability became clear. Jonathan had given her access to household accounts with limited balances while maintaining control of the major assets and business accounts. She had been living in a mansion, driving expensive cars and wearing designer clothes while having no real access to the wealth that funded that lifestyle. He's been systematically isolating you financially, Sarah said grimly. Classic financial abuse. You've been living like a wealthy woman while actually being completely dependent on his goodwill. Detective Hall's phone rang, and she stepped away to take the call. When she returned, her expression was grim. Mrs. Matthews, your husband has been released on bail. His lawyer posted it within 2 hours. However, the judge has granted a temporary restraining order. He cannot come within 500 feet of you, and he cannot contact you directly. What about the house? Rebecca asked. All my things are there. My whole life is there. We can arrange a police escort for you to collect your belongings, Detective Hall replied, but I wouldn't recommend staying there alone, especially this close to your due date. Sarah squeezed Rebecca's hand. You're staying with me. My guest room is already prepared, and it's time you had someone on your side instead of being isolated in that house. Rebecca felt overwhelmed by the kindness, but also terrified by the implications. Sarah, I don't even know how to be on my own. I went from my parents' house to college to marriage. I've never had to take care of myself financially. Then it's time to learn, Sarah said firmly, and you won't be learning alone. But Rebecca, you need to understand something important. The man you married deliberately kept you dependent and isolated. That's not love. That's control. Detective Hall gathered her notes. Mrs. Matthews, we'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. And I strongly recommend that you speak with a financial advisor as soon as possible. If your husband has been moving assets, time is crucial in protecting your rights. After Detective Hall left, Rebecca and Sarah sat in the quiet hospital room, the reality of the situation settling over them. I feel so stupid, Rebecca said finally. How did I not see this? How did I live with a man for 3 years and not know who he really was? Because he's a sociopath, Sarah said bluntly. Rebecca, manipulation is a skill, and some people are experts at it. He didn't fool you because you're naive. He fooled you because he's practiced. Rebecca's phone, which had been charging on the bedside table, suddenly lit up with a text message. Both women looked at it, and Rebecca's face went pale. The message was from Jonathan. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding that we can work out privately. Think about our daughter's future. Sarah immediately took the phone. He's already violating the restraining order. I'm forwarding this to Detective Hall. He's right about one thing, Rebecca said quietly. I do need to think about our daughter's future. And I'm starting to realize that future might be better without her father in it. It was a shocking thought for a woman who had planned her entire adult life around supporting her husband's success in building a traditional family. But as Rebecca lay in the hospital bed, her unborn daughter moving gently inside her, she began to imagine a different kind of future entirely. One built on truth instead of lies. One where she was valued instead of controlled. One where her daughter would grow up seeing her mother as strong instead of subservient. The question was, did she have the courage to build that future? Rebecca woke in Sarah's guest bedroom to the sound of rain against the windows and the unfamiliar sensation of safety. For the first time in months, she had slept through the night without jumping at every sound, without wondering what mood her millionaire husband would be in when he returned from his business meetings. Sarah appeared in the doorway with a cup of herbal tea and a folder thick with legal documents. "How are you feeling? Any contractions or discomfort?" "Just tired," Rebecca said, accepting the tea gratefully, and terrified, and relieved, all at the same time. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her expression serious. "Rebecca, we need to talk about what Detective Hall found yesterday. The financial investigation is revealing things that are much worse than we initially thought." Rebecca's stomach clenched. "How much worse?" "Your husband has been systematically moving money out of your joint accounts for the past year," Sarah said, opening the folder. "Not just the $25,000 for jewelry. We're talking about close to $2 million transferred to accounts in Valerie Cooper's name." The number was so large that Rebecca couldn't immediately process it. $2 million? That's impossible. Jonathan's successful, but we're not that wealthy. "Rebecca, your husband's company is worth significantly more than you know," Sarah said gently. "Matthews Tech Solutions was valued at $50 million in their last round of funding. As his wife, you're entitled to half of the marital assets, but only if we can prove what belongs to the marriage versus what he's hidden." Rebecca set down her tea with shaking hands. "I don't understand any of this. I thought I managed our money, but apparently I was just managing an allowance." "It's a classic pattern of financial abuse," Sarah explained. "Give the spouse access to household accounts so they feel involved while maintaining complete control of the real assets. You've been living in a gilded cage, and you didn't even know it was a cage." Dr. Amanda Foster's voice came from downstairs as she let herself in with the key Sarah had provided. "Rebecca, how are we feeling this morning?" "Up here, Dr. Foster," Sarah called. "She's awake and ready for the checkup." Dr. Foster climbed the stairs with her medical bag, her presence bringing reassurance to both women. "I wanted to check on you and our little girl after yesterday's trauma. How was your night?" "I actually slept," Rebecca said with surprise. "I haven't slept well in months." Dr. Foster's examination showed that both mother and baby were thriving despite the stress. "Your blood pressure is actually lower than it's been in weeks," she noted. "Sometimes removing ourselves from stressful situations has immediate health benefits." "Dr. Foster," Rebecca said hesitantly, "can stress during pregnancy affect the baby's development?" "Chronic stress can have impacts, yes," Dr. Foster replied carefully. "But the good news is that you're removing yourself from that stress now. Your daughter will benefit from having a mother who prioritizes her own well-being." After Dr. Foster left, Sarah returned to the financial documents with grim determination. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about something. How much do you actually know about Jonathan's business?" "The basics," Rebecca said. "He develops software solutions for companies. He has about 50 employees. He's always traveling for client meetings." "When was the last time you actually saw his office or met his employees?" Rebecca thought about it, realizing with growing unease that she couldn't remember. "He always said the office was boring, that I wouldn't be interested, and his work parties were always business only." Sarah was making notes. "Rebecca, I think it's time we found out exactly what kind of business your husband runs and what kind of assets we're dealing with. I'm going to hire a private investigator." "Is that necessary?" Rebecca asked, though she was beginning to understand that everything she thought she knew might be wrong. "Honey, your husband has a pregnant mistress, has been stealing marital assets, and physically assaulted you when confronted with evidence. Yes, it's necessary." Rebecca's phone rang, startling both women. The caller ID showed Eleanor Stone's jewelry store. "Mrs. Matthews, this is Eleanor Stone. I hope you're feeling better today." "Much better, thank you," Rebecca replied. "Mrs. Stone, I can't thank you enough for what you did yesterday. Please call me Eleanor. and I'm calling because I have some information you might find useful. After the police finished with their investigation yesterday, I went through my records more carefully. Rebecca put the phone on speaker so Sarah could hear. Your husband has been a customer for almost 2 years, Eleanor continued. Not 6 months as I initially thought. The first purchase was for someone with the initial M, then later purchases for someone with the initial V. Both expensive, both secretive. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Mrs. Stone, this is Sarah Collins, Rebecca's attorney. Are you saying there might have been another woman before Valerie? That's exactly what I'm saying, Eleanor replied. The M purchases stopped about a year ago, right around the time the V purchases began. I have security footage going back 18 months if you think it would be helpful. Rebecca felt sick. How many women has he been with? I can't answer that, Eleanor said gently. But I can tell you that in 30 years of business, I've learned to recognize the signs of a man leading a double life. Your husband has all of them. After they hung up, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca, I think we're dealing with more than a simple affair. I think we're dealing with a pattern of behavior that goes back years. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. This time it was from an unknown number. Rebecca, this is Valerie Cooper. We need to talk. What Jonathan did to you was wrong, and there are things you need to know. Sarah immediately reached for the phone. We're not responding to this without more information. But what if she knows something that could help? Rebecca asked. Or what if this is Jonathan manipulating the situation through her? Sarah countered. Rebecca, until we know more about what we're dealing with, we trust no one who's been involved with your husband. Detective Patricia Hall called an hour later with an update that made the situation even more complex. Mrs. Matthews, we've been investigating your husband's business practices, and we've discovered some irregularities. It appears that Matthews Tech Solutions has been involved in some questionable contracts with overseas clients. We're coordinating with federal investigators now. Federal investigators? Rebecca repeated weakly. I can't share details of an ongoing investigation, Detective Hall explained, but I can tell you that your husband's legal troubles may extend far beyond domestic violence charges. After the call ended, Rebecca sat in a stunned silence. Sarah, who did I marry? A very dangerous man who's been living multiple lives, Sarah replied grimly. Rebecca, we need to move quickly on protecting your rights and your daughter's future. If federal investigators are involved, assets could be frozen. We need to establish your claims before that happens. I don't even know where to start, Rebecca said, feeling overwhelmed. We start by learning the truth, Sarah said firmly, about his business, his finances, his other relationships, and his real character. And we start by getting you back some power in this situation. Sarah's phone rang, and she glanced at the caller ID with surprise. It's Detective Hall again. Mrs. Collins, I'm calling with some urgent information. We've just executed a search warrant on Jonathan Matthews' office and home. Mrs. Matthews, you cannot return to your house until further notice. It's now part of a federal investigation. Rebecca felt the last of her old life slip away. What did they find? I can't share specifics, but I can tell you that your decision to leave when you did was the right one. Your husband is not the man you thought he was, and your daughter is safer with you away from him. As they hung up, Rebecca placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter move. I'm sorry, little one, she whispered. I'm sorry I chose such a terrible father for you, but I promise you, we're going to build something better together. Sarah squeezed her friend's shoulder. Rebecca, you didn't choose a terrible father. You chose what you thought was a good man who turned out to be someone else entirely. There's a difference. Is there? Rebecca asked. I lived with him for 3 years. How could I not see the signs? Because he's a professional manipulator, Sarah said firmly, and because you trusted in good faith. That's not a character flaw, Rebecca. That's evidence that you have the capacity for real love, unlike him. Rebecca looked around Sarah's comfortable guest room, with its soft colors and peaceful atmosphere. It was smaller than her walk-in closet at the mansion, but it felt more like home than anywhere she had lived in years. Sarah, I think I want to fight back, she said quietly. Not just for the money or the assets, but for the truth. I want people to know who Jonathan Matthews really is. Sarah smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. Now you're talking like the Rebecca I knew in college, the one who never backed down from a challenge. That Rebecca got lost somewhere along the way, Rebecca said. But maybe it's time to find her again. As if in response to her mother's words, the baby gave a strong kick, and Rebecca laughed despite everything. I think she agrees. Outside, the rain was stopping, and afternoon sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. Rebecca realized that for the first time in years, she was looking forward to tomorrow. 3 days after the assault at Sterling and Associates Jewelry, Rebecca found herself sitting across from Valerie Cooper in a small cafe downtown, chaperoned by Sarah and feeling like she was living in someone else's life. Valerie was younger than Rebecca had expected, petite with blonde hair and nervous energy. She was obviously pregnant, though only beginning to show. Her hands shook slightly as she stirred sugar into her coffee. I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen, Valerie said without preamble. When I started seeing Jonathan, he told me he was separated. He said you were getting divorced but living in the same house for financial reasons until the paperwork was final. Rebecca studied the woman who had been sleeping with her husband. Despite everything, she found it hard to hate her. Valerie looked terrified and genuinely remorseful. How long? Rebecca asked simply. 8 months, Valerie admitted. We met at a tech conference in Denver. He was charming, successful, and he seemed so unhappy in his marriage. He said you had grown apart, that you didn't understand his work, that you were only interested in his money. Sarah made a note in her legal pad. Ms. Cooper, did Mr. Matthews ever mention that his wife was pregnant? Valerie's face crumpled. Not until last week. He told me you had accidentally gotten pregnant just as he was going to ask for a divorce. He made it sound like you had trapped him. Rebecca felt a familiar pain in her chest. Even his explanations to his mistress painted her as the villain. Valerie, when did you find out you were pregnant? 6 weeks ago, Valerie said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan was thrilled. He said it was perfect timing, that he could leave you and start fresh with me and our baby. Did he ever mention that Rebecca's baby was planned? Sarah asked. Valerie's eyes widened. Planned? He said it was an accident, that you had gone off birth control without telling him. Rebecca felt sick. We tried to get pregnant for 2 years. We went through fertility treatments. Jonathan was with me at every doctor's appointment, holding my hand when I cried every month it didn't work. The devastation on Valerie's face was genuine. He lied to me about everything, didn't he? It appears so, Sarah said gently. Ms. Cooper, what can you tell us about Jonathan's business practices? Did he ever share confidential information with you? Valerie shifted uncomfortably. Sometimes he would ask about my company's upcoming projects. He said he was just making conversation, trying to understand my work better. You work for Titan Digital Solutions, Sarah continued. That's Matthews Tech's biggest competitor. I know that now, Valerie said miserably. But at the time, I thought he was just being supportive. He would ask about our client strategies, our pricing models, our new product launches. I thought he was trying to help me advance my career. Rebecca leaned forward. Valerie, how much money did Jonathan spend on you? Too much, Valerie replied immediately. He bought me a car, paid for my apartment upgrade, expensive dinners, jewelry. I told him it was too much, but he said he loved spoiling me. He said you didn't appreciate nice things anymore. Sarah was taking extensive notes. Ms. Cooper, are you willing to testify about Mr. Matthews' business questions and the timeline of your relationship? If it helps Rebecca, yes, Valerie said, then looked directly at her. I am so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that if I had known the truth, I never would have gotten involved with him. Rebecca studied the younger woman's face, seeing genuine remorse and fear. Valerie, are you afraid of him? Terrified, Valerie admitted. When he found out I was talking to the police, he called me screaming. He said if I testified against him, he would make sure I lost my job and my baby. Then he showed up at my apartment. Sarah's head snapped up. When was this? Last night, Valerie said. He violated his restraining order to come to my place. He was desperate, angry, and completely different from the man I thought I knew. He offered me money to disappear, to get an abortion, and move away. Did you report this to Detective Hall? Sarah asked. I was too scared, Valerie admitted, but I recorded our conversation on my phone. Sarah and Rebecca exchanged glances. Ms. Cooper, that recording could be crucial evidence. Jonathan is clearly trying to intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice. Valerie pulled out her phone with trembling hands. He said things that made me realize I never knew him at all. The recording was chilling. Jonathan's voice was cold and threatening as he offered Valerie $50,000 to disappear and keep quiet about their relationship. "You stupid girl," his voice came through the phone speaker. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Rebecca is nothing. She's weak, but you could destroy everything I've built. Take the money, get rid of the baby, and move across the country. It's your only option." Valerie's voice on the recording was shaky but defiant. "Jonathan, I won't get an abortion, and I won't lie for you anymore." "Then you'll regret this decision," Jonathan's voice replied coldly. "I have resources you can't imagine. I can make your life very difficult." Sarah immediately called Detective Hall while Rebecca sat in stunned silence. The man on that recording was a stranger, someone capable of threatening a pregnant woman and her unborn child. "Detective Hall is sending officers to pick up both of you," Sarah said after ending the call. "Valerie, you're in danger. Jonathan is escalating, and he's desperate." "I can't afford protection," Valerie said helplessly. "I'm a marketing executive, not a millionaire." "You don't need to afford it," Rebecca said suddenly. "We'll make sure you're safe. Sarah, can we arrange something?" Sarah nodded. "I know a private security firm that handles witness protection for high-profile cases." "Rebecca, this is going to be expensive." "I don't care about the money," Rebecca said firmly. "Valerie, you made a mistake, but you don't deserve to be threatened. And your baby doesn't deserve to be in danger because of Jonathan's crimes." Valerie started crying. "Why are you helping me? I ruined your marriage." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. "Valerie, Jonathan ruined my marriage. You were just another one of his victims. And I've been where you are, isolated, scared, and dependent on a man who turned out to be dangerous." Detective Hall arrived with 2 officers, and the seriousness of their expressions made it clear that the situation had escalated beyond a simple domestic violence case. "Ladies, we need to talk," Detective Hall said. "Mr. Matthews' business is under federal investigation for money laundering and corporate espionage. The affair with Ms. Cooper was likely part of a larger scheme to steal trade secrets from Titan Digital Solutions." Valerie went pale. "He was using me to get information about my company?" "It appears so," Detective Hall confirmed. "Ms. Cooper, you're not just a witness to domestic violence anymore. You're a key witness in a federal criminal case." Rebecca felt the ground shifting beneath her again. "Detective Hall, what does this mean for my daughter and me?" "It means you made the right choice by leaving when you did," Detective Hall replied. "And it means this case is much bigger than any of us initially realized." Sarah was already on her phone, calling the private security firm. Rebecca reached across the table and took Valerie's hand. "We're going to get through this," she said firmly. "Both of us, and both of our daughters." Valerie squeezed her hand gratefully. "I don't understand how you can be so kind to me." Rebecca thought about it for a moment. Because kindness is something Jonathan never understood. He used people, manipulated them, discarded them when they were no longer useful. "I refuse to become like him." As they waited for the security arrangements to be finalized, Rebecca realized something important had changed. She was no longer thinking of herself as a victim of her husband's betrayal. She was thinking of herself as a survivor who had the power to help others survive too. "Valerie," she said quietly, "when this is all over, when Jonathan is in prison where he belongs, I want you to know that your daughter will always be welcome in our lives. She didn't choose her father any more than my daughter did." It was a radical thought for a woman who had discovered her husband's affair only days before. But Rebecca was beginning to understand that her old life had been built on lies, competition, and scarcity. Her new life could be built on truth, cooperation, and abundance. The question was no longer whether she could forgive Valerie Cooper. The question was whether she could forgive herself for believing in Jonathan Matthews for so long. Looking at the frightened young woman across from her, Rebecca thought the answer might be yes. Margaret Matthews arrived at Sarah's house like a storm front, her silver Mercedes pulling into the driveway with unnecessary aggression. Rebecca watched from the living room window as her mother-in-law emerged from the car, wearing a designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent and an expression that could freeze fire. "She's here," Rebecca said to Sarah, who was immediately at her side. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah asked. "You don't owe her anything, especially not in your condition." Rebecca was 38 weeks pregnant now, her due date only 2 weeks away. The stress of the past week had taken its toll, but she felt stronger than she had in years. I need to hear what she has to say. I need to understand how Jonathan became the man he is. Margaret Matthews knocked on the front door with the imperious confidence of someone accustomed to having doors open for her. Sarah answered while Rebecca remained seated, conserving her energy for what she suspected would be an exhausting confrontation. "Mrs. Collins, I assume," Margaret said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of old money and older privilege. "I'm here to see my daughter-in-law." "Mrs. Matthews, please come in," Sarah replied politely but coolly. "Rebecca is in the living room." Margaret entered the modestly furnished room and looked around with barely concealed disdain before her eyes settled on Rebecca. At 62, she was an elegant woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of intimidation through appearance and attitude. "Rebecca, dear, you look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "This stress cannot be good for the baby." "Hello, Margaret," Rebecca replied calmly. "I'm doing much better now that I'm away from your son." Margaret's carefully controlled expression flickered with irritation. "That's exactly what we need to discuss. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand. Jonathan made a mistake, yes, but destroying his life isn't going to help anyone." Sarah took a seat nearby, her legal pad and pen ready. "Mrs. Matthews, are you here in any official capacity?" "I'm here as a grandmother concerned about her unborn granddaughter's future," Margaret replied smoothly, "and as a mother trying to clean up the mess her son has made." Rebecca felt her daughter move restlessly, as if sensing the tension in the room. "Margaret, your son didn't make a mistake. He had a deliberate affair, used marital assets to support his mistress, and physically assaulted me when I discovered the truth." "Men stray sometimes," Margaret said dismissively. "It's unfortunate, but hardly unusual. The important thing is protecting the family reputation and ensuring that my granddaughter grows up with the advantages she deserves." "Advantages like watching her father abuse her mother?" Sarah interjected. Margaret's eyes flashed dangerously. "Ms. Collins, I don't think you understand the situation. The Matthews family has significant resources and influence. We can make Rebecca's life very comfortable, or we can make it very difficult." Rebecca felt a familiar chill, the same feeling she had experienced countless times during her marriage when Jonathan or his mother would make veiled threats disguised as helpful advice. "Margaret," Rebecca said quietly, "are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a solution," Margaret replied smoothly. "Jonathan will pay for private treatment for his anger issues. You'll return home after the baby is born. You'll continue to live as you always have, comfortably, securely, with all the advantages that come with being a Matthews wife." "And in return?" Sarah asked. "In return, Rebecca drops all charges, provides no testimony to investigators, and maintains the family privacy that benefits everyone," Margaret said as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. Rebecca stared at her mother-in-law in amazement. "Margaret, do you understand that your son is under federal investigation? That he threatened a pregnant woman? That he's been stealing from our marriage to fund his affairs?" "I understand that Jonathan has made some poor choices," Margaret replied, "but I also understand that destroying him serves no one. Rebecca, dear, think practically. You have no education, no career, no family money. Without Jonathan, what kind of life can you provide for my granddaughter?" The words hit their target with practiced precision. These were the fears Margaret had been carefully cultivating in Rebecca for 3 years, the insecurities that had kept her compliant and grateful. But something had changed in Rebecca during the past week. Instead of feeling ashamed and small, she felt angry and clear. "Margaret, I have a master's degree in interior design," Rebecca said firmly. "I had a successful career before I married Jonathan. I gave it up because he insisted I focus on being his wife and supporting his career." "Interior design," Margaret said with a dismissive laugh. "Rebecca, that's hardly a career that will support the lifestyle you've become accustomed to." Sarah leaned forward. "Mrs. Matthews, are you aware that your son has been transferring marital assets to accounts controlled by his mistress? Assets that belonged partly to Rebecca?" Margaret's expression didn't change, but Rebecca caught a flicker of something. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "I'm aware that Jonathan has been financially irresponsible. That's why we need to resolve this quickly and quietly." "How long have you known about the affairs?" Rebecca asked suddenly. Margaret was quiet for a moment too long. "What affairs?" Plural, Rebecca said. Eleanor Stone has records going back 2 years. There was someone before Valerie, someone with the initial M. How long have you known that your son is a serial cheater? Margaret's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. Rebecca, what Jonathan does in his private life is between you and him. That's not an answer, Sarah said. Mrs. Matthews, did you know about your son's extramarital relationships? Jonathan is a powerful man with significant responsibilities, Margaret said stiffly. Powerful men sometimes have needs that their wives don't understand or can't meet. Rebecca felt sick. Margaret, are you saying that Jonathan's affairs are my fault? I'm saying that marriage requires compromise and understanding, Margaret replied. Perhaps if you had been more attentive to Jonathan's needs, more supportive of his success, more appreciative of the life he provided, he wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah was taking notes furiously, and Rebecca realized that this conversation was revealing more about the Matthews family dynamics than hours of therapy might have accomplished. Mrs. Matthews, Sarah said carefully, are you suggesting that domestic violence is acceptable if a wife doesn't meet her husband's expectations? I'm suggesting that what happened at that jewelry store was an unfortunate moment of stress that's being blown completely out of proportion, Margaret replied smoothly. Jonathan was shocked by Rebecca's accusations and reacted emotionally. It won't happen again. How can you be sure? Rebecca asked. Because next time, you won't be naive enough to confront him in public, Margaret said with chilling matter-of-factness. Sarah's pen stopped moving. Mrs. Matthews, did you just advise Rebecca to hide future abuse? Margaret seemed to realize she had said too much. I'm simply suggesting that private matters should remain private. Rebecca stood up slowly, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward, but her resolve making it powerful. Margaret, I want you to leave. Rebecca, don't be foolish, Margaret said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. You think you can survive on your own, but you can't. You think people will support you, but when the novelty wears off, when the legal bills pile up, when you're a single mother working for minimum wage, you'll come crawling back, and we might not be willing to take you back. Then I guess we'll find out, Rebecca said firmly. Sarah, would you please show Mrs. Matthews to the door? Margaret stood, her composure returning with practiced ease. Rebecca, you have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, the Matthews family will protect its interests with or without your cooperation. After Margaret left, Rebecca sat heavily on the couch, emotionally exhausted. That was incredible, Sarah said. Rebecca, do you realize what just happened? She threatened me, Rebecca said quietly. Again. She did more than that, Sarah replied. She basically admitted that the family knew about Jonathan's pattern of abuse and affairs. She outlined their strategy for covering it up, and she made legal threats that could constitute witness intimidation. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mom says you're being stubborn. Last chance to be reasonable. Think about what you're throwing away. Grace. Sarah read the message over Rebecca's shoulder. That's from Jonathan's sister. Grace has always been caught between Jonathan and Margaret, Rebecca explained. I thought she might be different, but apparently family loyalty wins out. Another text arrived, this one longer. Rebecca, I know you think we're all against you, but we're trying to protect you too. Jonathan can be vindictive when he doesn't get his way. Please consider Mom's offer. It's better than the alternative. Grace. Rebecca stared at the messages, finally understanding the full scope of what she was up against. This wasn't just about divorcing an abusive husband. This was about breaking free from an entire family system built on control, manipulation, and the protection of wealth and status above all else. Sarah, she said quietly, what kind of family threatens a pregnant woman? The kind that raised a man who pushes his pregnant wife down in public, Sarah replied grimly. Rebecca, the Matthews family isn't just wealthy. They're toxic, and they're dangerous. Rebecca felt her daughter kick strongly, as if reminding her that this fight wasn't just about her anymore. Then we need to make sure they can't hurt us, Rebecca said with new determination. Sarah, I want to fight back, not just for me, but for my daughter. She deserves to grow up knowing that her mother didn't back down when it mattered. Sarah smiled for the first time since Margaret's visit. Now you're talking like a fighter. And Rebecca, you're going to win this because you have something they don't have. What's that? Rebecca asked. The truth, Sarah replied. And that's more powerful than all their money and threats combined. As if in agreement, Rebecca's daughter gave another strong kick, and Rebecca placed her hand on her belly with a smile. You hear that, little one? We're going to be just fine. At 39 weeks pregnant, Rebecca Matthews stood in what had once been her dream home, flanked by police officers and watching strangers catalog every expensive item that had defined her marriage. The federal asset seizure team worked with methodical efficiency, photographing and documenting everything from Jonathan's home office to the art collection they had purchased together during happier times. Mrs. Matthews, you have 30 minutes to collect personal items, Detective Hall said gently. Clothing, jewelry that was gifts to you personally, photographs, items for the baby. Nothing that could be considered marital assets subject to forfeiture. Rebecca walked through the mansion that had been her prison disguised as paradise, seeing it clearly for the first time. The designer furniture she had thought reflected Jonathan's success now looked like props in an elaborate deception. The expensive art that had made her feel sophisticated now seemed like evidence of stolen money and corrupted achievement. Sarah followed her upstairs to the master bedroom, where Rebecca's maternity clothes hung in a walk-in closet larger than most people's bedrooms. How are you holding up? Sarah asked as Rebecca packed a suitcase with shaking hands. I feel like I'm robbing my own life, Rebecca replied, folding a sweater that had cost more than some people's monthly salary. Everything I thought was mine wasn't really mine at all. She stopped in front of her jewelry box, a wedding gift from Margaret Matthews that had seemed so thoughtful at the time. Now Rebecca wondered if it had been another form of control, another way to make her feel indebted to the family. Take whatever was given to you personally, Sarah advised. Wedding ring, engagement ring, birthday gifts. Those are legally yours regardless of the asset investigation. Rebecca's engagement ring sat in its special slot, the 3-carat diamond that had once made her feel so loved and chosen. Now she wondered if it had been purchased with money stolen from business partners or client accounts. I don't want it, she said suddenly, closing the jewelry box without taking anything. I don't want any of it. Every piece has been tainted by lies. They moved to the nursery, the room Rebecca had spent months preparing with such joy and anticipation. The custom crib, the hand-painted mural, the rocking chair where she had imagined nursing her daughter, all of it would be seized as part of the federal investigation. We can buy new everything, Sarah said softly. Better everything. Things chosen with freedom instead of fear. Rebecca packed the few items that felt purely hers. A blanket her mother had knitted, a children's book that had been her own as a child, a stuffed elephant she had bought impulsively one day while shopping alone. In Jonathan's office, federal agents were loading computers and files into evidence boxes. Rebecca glanced at the room where her husband had conducted his double life, wondering how many secrets those walls had contained. Mrs. Matthews? One of the agents approached her with a manila folder. We found these in your husband's desk. They appear to be personal to you. Rebecca opened the folder with curiosity that quickly turned to horror. Inside were detailed financial records documenting her spending over the past 3 years. Every grocery purchase, every doctor's appointment, every small personal expense had been tracked and categorized. But worse than the surveillance was the commentary written in Jonathan's handwriting along the margins. Unnecessary medical expenses, anxiety claims next to her therapy sessions. Excessive food costs, portion control needed next to grocery receipts. Vanity spending next to maternity clothes purchases. He was monitoring everything, Rebecca whispered, showing the documents to Sarah. He knew every dollar I spent and judged every purchase. Sarah's face darkened as she read through the files. Rebecca, this is evidence of severe financial abuse. He was controlling you through surveillance and shame. The most devastating page was titled Rebecca's Value Analysis and contained a coldly calculated assessment of Rebecca's cost versus benefit as a wife. Her pregnancy was listed under negatives, with the notation limits travel and social obligations. Her interior design background was listed under potential assets, with the note could be useful for property staging if properly directed. I was a business investment to him, Rebecca said, her voice barely audible. Not a person, not even a particularly good investment. Detective Hall approached them as Rebecca finished packing. Mrs. Matthews, I wanted you to know that we found significant evidence of financial crimes in your husband's records. The federal prosecutors are confident they have enough for multiple felony convictions. What does that mean for Rebecca and the baby? Sarah asked. It means she made the right choice by leaving when she did, Detective Hall replied. Mr. Matthews won't be in a position to threaten anyone for a very long time. As they prepared to leave the house, Rebecca stopped at the front door and looked back one more time. A year ago, she would have been devastated to lose this symbol of success and security. Now she felt only relief. Rebecca, Sarah said gently, any regrets? Rebecca considered the question seriously. I regret the time I lost believing his lies. I regret the person I became while trying to please him. But leaving? No regrets at all. They drove to Dr. Foster's office for Rebecca's final prenatal appointment before her due date. The medical practice felt like sanctuary after the emotional intensity of the house visit. How are we feeling today? Dr. Foster asked after examining Rebecca. Any contractions? Any signs that our little girl is ready to make her appearance? She's been very active, Rebecca said. I think she knows something big is happening. Dr. Foster's expression became more serious. Rebecca, I need to ask about your support system for after the birth. Given everything that's happening with your husband, do you have people who can help you during recovery and the newborn period? I'll be staying with Sarah until I can find a place of our own, Rebecca replied. And Eleanor Stone from the jewelry store has become an unexpected friend. She's offered to help however she can. Mrs. Stone is a remarkable woman, Dr. Foster said with a smile. She's been supporting women through difficult transitions for decades. You're in good hands. After the appointment, Sarah drove them to Eleanor's jewelry store for an unusual meeting. Eleanor had called the night before with a proposal that had surprised them both. Rebecca, dear, come in, Eleanor said, embracing her carefully. How are you feeling? You're glowing despite everything. I'm nervous about what you wanted to discuss, Rebecca admitted. Eleanor led them to her office behind the store, where the walls were covered with photos spanning her 30-year career in luxury jewelry. Rebecca, I have a business proposal for you. A business proposal? Rebecca repeated. I'm 68 years old, Eleanor said. I've been considering retirement, but I haven't found the right person to take over the store. You have a master's degree in interior design, an eye for beauty, and more strength than you realize. I'd like to offer you a partnership. Rebecca stared at her in shock. Eleanor, I don't know anything about running a jewelry business, but you know about design, about helping people mark important moments in their lives, about creating beautiful spaces, Eleanor replied. And you know what it's like to rebuild your life from nothing. Those are exactly the qualifications I'm looking for. Sarah was taking notes, her legal mind already analyzing the opportunity. What kind of partnership are you proposing, Mrs. Stone? I would maintain majority ownership initially, but Rebecca would learn the business and earn increasing equity over time, Eleanor explained. She would focus on the design aspects, custom pieces, store layout, helping clients choose jewelry for special occasions. I would handle the business operations until she's ready to take on more responsibility. Rebecca felt overwhelmed. Eleanor, why would you do this for me? Eleanor's expression grew serious. Because 30 years ago, I was where you are now. Pregnant, scared, financially dependent on a man who turned out to be someone completely different from who I thought he was. A woman I barely knew gave me a chance to rebuild my life, and that chance led to everything I've accomplished since. What happened to your husband? Rebecca asked quietly. Prison, Eleanor said simply. Embezzlement. Just like yours, he had been living a double life funded by stolen money. The difference was that in 1995, there weren't as many resources for women in our situation. I had to figure it out completely on my own. Rebecca looked around the elegant office at the evidence of Eleanor's success and independence. And you built all this yourself? With help from other women who understood what it meant to start over, Eleanor replied. Rebecca, successful women have a responsibility to lift up other women. It's how we create change. Sarah was reviewing the preliminary partnership agreement Eleanor had prepared. This is incredibly generous, Mrs. Stone. The terms are more than fair. It's not generosity, Eleanor corrected. It's investment. I believe Rebecca has the potential to take this business places I never imagined. And I believe she deserves the chance to discover what she's capable of when she's not being controlled and diminished. Rebecca felt tears threatening. Eleanor, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by succeeding, Eleanor replied firmly. Thank me by never again accepting less than you deserve. Thank me by showing your daughter what a strong, independent woman looks like. As they left the jewelry store, Rebecca felt a shift in how she saw her future. For the first time since discovering Jonathan's betrayal, she wasn't just thinking about survival, she was thinking about success. Sarah, she said as they drove back to the house, I think I want to take Eleanor's offer. I think you should, Sarah agreed. Rebecca, you have a chance to build something that's completely yours. No lies, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. Just your talent and hard work. That evening, Rebecca sat in Sarah's guest room, looking through interior design magazines and imagining how she might transform Sterling and Associates jewelry into something even more beautiful and welcoming. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Sleep well, dear. Tomorrow we start planning your new life. Rebecca placed her hand on her belly and spoke to her unborn daughter. Did you hear that, little one? We're going to build something amazing together, something that's completely ours. For the first time in months, Rebecca fell asleep planning for the future instead of worrying about the past. Rebecca's contractions started at 3 in the morning, exactly 1 week before her scheduled due date. She woke Sarah with the calm announcement that it was time, and by sunrise they were at Metropolitan General Hospital, where Dr. Foster was waiting with her reassuring presence and professional competence. How are we feeling? Dr. Foster asked as she examined Rebecca in the delivery room. Ready to meet your daughter? More than ready, Rebecca replied, though her mind was on more than just the birth. Jonathan's trial was scheduled to begin in 2 weeks, and the federal prosecutors had requested that Rebecca testify about the financial abuse and domestic violence. She had agreed, but the timing meant her daughter would be born into a world where her father was facing serious criminal charges. Labor progressed quickly, as if Rebecca's daughter was as eager as her mother to start their new life together. Sarah held one hand while Eleanor Stone, who had become an unexpected birth partner, held the other. You're doing beautifully, Eleanor said as another contraction peaked. Just think, in a few hours, you'll be holding the most important person in your life. 8 hours later, Rebecca held her daughter for the first time, overwhelmed by the immediate and fierce love that flooded through her. The baby was perfect. Dark hair like Rebecca's, bright, alert eyes, and a grip strong enough to suggest she would be a fighter like her mother. What will you name her? Dr. Foster asked softly. Rebecca looked down at her daughter's face, thinking about the strong women who had helped her find her way back to herself. Elena, she said. Elena Grace Matthews, after Eleanor, who gave me a second chance. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Rebecca, that's beautiful. Sarah was already on her phone, texting updates to Detective Hall and the legal team. The prosecutors want to know if you're still planning to testify next week. They can delay if you need more recovery time. I'll testify, Rebecca said firmly, her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Elena deserves to grow up knowing that her mother stood up for the truth. 3 days later, Rebecca was released from the hospital with her daughter, moving into the small apartment above Eleanor's jewelry store that would serve as their temporary home. The space was modest compared to the mansion she had left behind, but it felt like a sanctuary. The trial of Jonathan Matthews began on a gray October morning, with Rebecca arriving at the courthouse carrying Elena in a baby carrier and flanked by Sarah and Eleanor. The media attention was intense. The fall of a prominent tech CEO accused of domestic violence, financial crimes, and corporate espionage made for compelling headlines. Jonathan sat at the defendant's table, looking impeccably dressed but noticeably thinner, his usual confidence replaced by the hollow look of a man whose carefully constructed life had collapsed. He glanced at Rebecca as she entered the courtroom, his eyes lingering on the baby, but Rebecca felt nothing but pity for him. The prosecution calls Rebecca Matthews to the stand, announced Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos, a woman in her 40s who specialized in domestic violence cases. Rebecca handed Elena to Eleanor and walked to the witness stand with steady steps. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, working with prosecutors to organize the evidence of Jonathan's financial abuse and manipulation. Mrs. Matthews, Maria Santos began, can you tell the court about your marriage to the defendant? Rebecca spoke clearly and calmly, describing the gradual isolation, the financial control, the monitoring of her spending, and the way Jonathan had systematically undermined her confidence and independence. Did you know about your husband's extramarital relationships during your marriage? Maria Santos asked. No, Rebecca replied. I discovered the first affair when I found evidence at Sterling and Associates Jewelry. That's when I learned he had been using our marital assets to purchase expensive gifts for his mistress. Jonathan's defense attorney, Michael Crawford, was skilled and aggressive, but his attempts to portray Rebecca as a vindictive ex-wife fell flat when confronted with a mountain of evidence against his client. Mrs. Matthews, Crawford said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you were living an extremely comfortable lifestyle as the defendant's wife? I was living in a beautiful prison, Rebecca replied. Comfort that comes at the cost of your dignity and autonomy isn't really comfort at all. You're asking this jury to believe that a man who provided you with a mansion, expensive cars, and unlimited spending money was abusing you? Rebecca looked directly at Jonathan as she answered, Mr. Crawford, financial abuse isn't about the amount of money involved. It's about control. Your client monitored every purchase I made, criticized my spending in writing, and made me feel grateful for access to money that was legally half mine. That's not generosity, that's manipulation. The most powerful moment came when prosecutors played the recording of Jonathan threatening Valerie Cooper. The jury's faces showed shock and disgust as they heard his cold threats against a pregnant woman. Valerie testified the next day, her own baby visible in her arms as she described how Jonathan had used her to steal corporate secrets while promising her a future he never intended to provide. Did the defendant ever express remorse for lying to you about his marriage? Maria Santos asked. Never, Valerie replied. When I confronted him about Rebecca being pregnant too, he said it was unfortunate timing, but that he could handle both situations. He treated us like problems to be managed, not people with feelings. Eleanor Stone's testimony was perhaps the most damaging to Jonathan's case. Her detailed account of witnessing the assault, combined with security footage from the jewelry store, left no doubt about what had occurred. Mrs. Stone, Maria Santos said, in your 30 years of business, have you seen situations like this before? Unfortunately, yes, Eleanor replied. I've seen men who maintain elaborate double lives funded by deception and manipulation. What I witnessed in my store was the moment when Mr. Matthews' carefully constructed lies collided with reality, and he responded with violence. The federal prosecutors presented evidence of Jonathan's money laundering and corporate espionage, showing how his affairs had been part of a broader pattern of criminal behavior. The FBI had traced nearly $5 million in stolen funds, much of it used to finance his lifestyle and his relationships with other women. On the fourth day of trial, Jonathan's sister Grace took the stand as a character witness, but her testimony backfired when she admitted under cross-examination that the family had known about Jonathan's indiscretions for years. Ms. Matthews? Maria Santos asked. Did your family ever discuss your brother's pattern of extramarital relationships? Grace shifted uncomfortably. We knew Jonathan had a wandering eye. We hoped marriage would settle him down. Did anyone in your family ever suggest that your brother seek counseling or address his behavior? We felt it was a private matter between Jonathan and his wife, Grace replied. Even when that private matter involved domestic violence against a pregnant woman? Grace's silence spoke volumes. Margaret Matthews did not testify, but her presence in the courtroom throughout the trial sent a clear message about the family's continued support for Jonathan, despite overwhelming evidence of his crimes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all charges: domestic violence, financial abuse, money laundering, and corporate espionage. Jonathan showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but Rebecca felt a profound sense of relief and justice. During the sentencing phase, Rebecca was given the opportunity to address the court with a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium holding Elena, looking directly at Jonathan as she spoke. Your Honor, the man sitting at that table stole more than money from me. He stole 3 years of my life, my sense of self-worth, and my ability to trust my own judgment. He isolated me from friends and family, monitored my every move, and made me grateful for scraps of affection and approval. But he also gave me something valuable, though he didn't intend to. He gave me a daughter who will grow up knowing that her mother refused to accept abuse. He showed me that I am stronger than I ever imagined, and that women supporting other women can overcome even the most powerful men. I don't ask for mercy for the defendant. I ask for justice for every woman who has been manipulated, controlled, and abused by men who use their wealth and power to escape consequences. I ask that this court send a message that domestic violence is a serious crime, regardless of the perpetrator's social status or bank account. Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Jonathan Matthews to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 8 years. The courtroom erupted in applause, which the judge allowed to continue for several moments before calling for order. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca faced a crowd of reporters and supporters. Women's rights organizations had rallied around her case, seeing it as a symbol of justice for wealthy abusers who had historically escaped consequences. "Mrs. Matthews, what's next for you and your daughter?" one reporter asked. Rebecca looked down at Elena, then at Eleanor and Sarah standing beside her. "We're going to build a life based on truth, hard work, and authentic relationships. My daughter will grow up knowing that she never has to accept less than she deserves from anyone. Do you have any message for other women in similar situations?" "You're stronger than you know," Rebecca said firmly, "and you're not alone. There are people who will help you, but first you have to help yourself by admitting the truth about what you're experiencing. The first step to freedom is acknowledging that you're in prison." As they walked away from the courthouse, Eleanor put her arm around Rebecca's shoulders. "How does it feel to have justice?" Rebecca considered the question. "It feels like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Jonathan will spend years in prison, but Elena and I get to spend years building something beautiful." That evening, in the small apartment above the jewelry store, Rebecca sat in the rocking chair she had bought with her first paycheck from Eleanor, nursing her daughter and looking out at the city lights. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, frightened, controlled, living a lie disguised as a fairy tale. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more authentic. Her phone buzzed with a text from Valerie Cooper. "Watch the news coverage. You were amazing today. Thank you for showing all of us what courage looks like." Rebecca smiled as she typed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. Our daughters are going to grow up in a better world because we didn't stay silent." As Elena fell asleep in her arms, Rebecca made a mental list of everything she wanted to accomplish in the coming year. Expand the jewelry store's custom design services, save money for their own house, reconnect with old friends she had lost during her marriage, and most importantly, raise her daughter to be strong and independent. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities that had nothing to do with Jonathan Matthews and everything to do with the life Rebecca was determined to build through her own choices and efforts. For the first time in years, she was genuinely excited about tomorrow. 6 months after Jonathan's conviction, Rebecca stood in the newly renovated Sterling and Associates jewelry store, watching Elena crawl across the soft carpet in the children's area she had designed. The store had been transformed from a traditional jewelry showroom into something warmer and more welcoming, a place where women could celebrate life's milestones with beauty and authenticity. "The engagement ring consultation area looks perfect," Eleanor said, admiring Rebecca's latest design addition. "I love how you've created intimate spaces for private conversations." Rebecca had used her interior design background to reimagine the customer experience, creating comfortable seating areas where couples could discuss their future while examining rings, and a special consultation room for women who were buying jewelry for themselves, a growing segment of their business. "I wanted women to feel empowered here," Rebecca explained, adjusting a display of custom necklaces she had designed. "Not like they're being sold to, but like they're celebrating their own worth." The business partnership with Eleanor had exceeded both women's expectations. Rebecca's design sensibility combined with Eleanor's decades of experience had created something special, a jewelry store that felt more like a boutique for life's important moments. "Rebecca, dear, you have a visitor," Eleanor said, gesturing toward the front of the store. Detective Patricia Hall stood near the entrance, holding a small wrapped package and wearing a smile that reached her eyes. "Mrs. Matthews, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I heard about your business success and wanted to congratulate you in person. Detective Hall, please call me Rebecca, she said, embracing the woman who had been instrumental in bringing Jonathan to justice. And thank you for everything you did to help us. I brought something for Elena, Detective Hall said, handing over the wrapped package. It's never too early to start building a library. Rebecca unwrapped a beautiful children's book about strong women throughout history. Thank you so much. Elena loves story time, even though she's too young to understand the words yet. She'll understand the message, Detective Hall said, watching the baby explore her surroundings with confident curiosity. That little girl is growing up knowing what a strong mother looks like. Detective Hall's visit wasn't entirely social. Rebecca, I wanted to update you on something. Jonathan's appeal was denied last week. His conviction and sentence are final. Rebecca felt a mixture of relief and closure. How did he take the news? Not well, according to his lawyers, Detective Hall replied. But Rebecca, that chapter of your life is truly over now. He can't hurt you or Elena anymore. After Detective Hall left, Rebecca settled into her office above the store to work on custom jewelry designs, a service that had become surprisingly popular among women who wanted pieces that told their personal stories. Her phone rang, and she smiled when she saw Valerie Cooper's name on the caller ID. The two women had maintained an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared experience of Jonathan's manipulation and their determination to build better lives for their daughters. "How's my favorite fellow survivor?" Rebecca answered warmly. "Exhausted but happy," Valerie replied. "Emma slept through the night for the first time, and I actually feel human again. How's Elena?" "Crawling everywhere and getting into everything," Rebecca said, watching her daughter investigate a dust bunny under her desk. "She's fearless, which both terrifies and inspires me." "Good," Valerie said firmly. "Our daughters should be fearless. They should grow up expecting respect and refusing to settle for less." Valerie had moved across the country after Jonathan's conviction, taking a job with a tech startup in Seattle where no one knew her history. She was raising her daughter Emma as a single mother by choice, having decided that independence was preferable to another potentially dangerous relationship. "I have news," Valerie continued. "I'm getting promoted to vice president of marketing. The company is doing well, and they're recognizing my work." "That's wonderful," Rebecca said genuinely. "You deserve every bit of success that comes your way." "We both do," Valerie replied. "Rebecca, I know this sounds strange given our history, but I'm grateful for what happened. Not the abuse or the lies, but the way it forced both of us to discover who we really are." Rebecca understood completely. "I know exactly what you mean. I was so focused on being the perfect wife that I lost myself entirely. Now I'm building something that's completely mine." After they hung up, Rebecca returned to her jewelry designs, but her concentration was interrupted by Sarah climbing the stairs to the office. "Working late again?" Sarah asked, settling into the comfortable chair Rebecca had placed near her desk for visitors. "Inspiration struck," Rebecca replied, showing Sarah her latest sketch. "It's a pendant design for new mothers, a tree with birthstone leaves for each child. The roots spell out strength in script." Sarah examined the design with appreciation. "It's beautiful, very symbolic." "Everything's symbolic now," Rebecca said with a laugh. "I can't design anything without it meaning something deeper about women's experiences." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "Speaking of symbols, I have some financial news. The final asset recovery is complete. Between the restitution from Jonathan's criminal case and the divorce settlement, you're going to be quite comfortable, Rebecca." "Yum. How comfortable?" Rebecca asked. "Comfortable enough to buy your own house, start a college fund for Elena, and expand the jewelry business if you want to," Sarah replied. "Comfortable enough that you never have to depend on anyone else for financial security." Rebecca felt a profound sense of relief, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented: freedom from fear, options for the future, and the ability to make choices based on what she wanted rather than what she could afford. "Sarah, I want to do something with part of the money," Rebecca said. "I want to start a fund to help other women leave abusive relationships, legal fees, temporary housing, job training, whatever they need to rebuild their lives." Sarah smiled. I was hoping you'd say something like that. I've already researched how to set up a nonprofit foundation. We could call it the Elena Foundation, for new beginnings. Perfect, Rebecca said, then paused. Actually, let's call it the Eleanor Foundation, after the woman who gave me my new beginning. Eleanor Stone appeared at the top of the stairs, having overheard the conversation. Did someone mention my name? We want to name a foundation after you, Rebecca explained. A fund to help women escape domestic violence and rebuild their lives. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Rebecca, that's the most beautiful honor I could imagine. But I have a condition. What condition? Sarah asked. You let me be the first major donor, Eleanor said firmly. I've been successful in business for 30 years, and I can't think of a better way to use that success than helping other women find their strength. That evening, Rebecca sat in the rocking chair in her apartment, feeding Elena while looking through real estate listings on her tablet. She was ready to move out of the temporary space above the store and into a real home, their first home together. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Rebecca, this is Grace Matthews. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to tell you something. Rebecca hesitated before responding. What is it, Grace? I left the family business. I couldn't work for a company that protected Jonathan while he hurt you. I wanted you to know that not everyone in the Matthews family supported what he did. Rebecca stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Thank you for telling me. That means more than you know. I also wanted to apologize for the way I handled everything. I was a coward when you needed support. We all make choices we regret, Rebecca replied. The important thing is learning from them. If you ever want Elena to know she has an aunt who cares about her, I'll be here, Grace wrote. Rebecca looked down at her daughter, who was watching her with bright, alert eyes. What do you think, little one? Should we give Aunt Grace a chance? Elena made a happy gurgling sound, which Rebecca chose to interpret as approval. Maybe, Rebecca texted back, when we're ready. As she prepared Elena for bed, Rebecca reflected on how much their lives had changed in less than a year. They had gone from living in a mansion built on lies to sharing a small apartment built on truth. From financial dependence to business partnership. From isolation to community. Most importantly, they had gone from fear to hope. Rebecca placed Elena in her crib and stood watching her daughter sleep, marveling at the peaceful expression on the tiny face. This little girl would grow up knowing she was wanted, valued, and loved unconditionally. She would see her mother as a business owner, not just a wife. She would learn that women could build their own success instead of depending on men for validation. Tomorrow we're going to look at houses, Rebecca whispered to her sleeping daughter. Real houses where we can paint the walls any color we want and plant gardens and make noise and be ourselves completely. Elena stirred slightly as if agreeing with the plan. Rebecca's phone buzzed one final time with a text from Eleanor. Sleep well, dear. Tomorrow we start planning the foundation. I can't wait to see how many lives we're going to change. Rebecca smiled as she turned off the lights. A year ago, she had been focused on surviving each day in a marriage that was slowly destroying her spirit. Now she was planning ways to help other women not just survive, but thrive. The transformation felt miraculous, but Rebecca knew it wasn't magic. It was the result of making one brave choice followed by another and another until courage became a habit and strength became her natural state. As she fell asleep, Rebecca dreamed of the foundation they would build, the women they would help, and the daughter who would grow up knowing that her mother had chosen truth over comfort and freedom over security. In the morning, they would start house hunting. In the evening, they would plan the foundation launch. In between, they would continue building a life that was entirely their own. It was exactly the kind of future Rebecca had never dared to imagine, and exactly the future Elena deserved. 1 year later, Rebecca stood in the sunlit kitchen of their new home, watching Elena take her first wobbling steps across the hardwood floor. The house was modest by her previous standards, but perfect by every measure that mattered. It was theirs, purchased with money she had earned, in a neighborhood where Elena could grow up safely. She's definitely going to be an early walker, Sarah observed, watching Elena navigate between the coffee table and her toy box with determined concentration. Independent from the start, just like her mother. Rebecca laughed as Elena plopped down and immediately started pulling herself up again. She definitely has opinions about how she wants to move through the world. The first annual Eleanor Foundation Gala was scheduled for that evening, and Rebecca felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the event. In 12 months, they had raised enough money to help 37 women leave abusive relationships and start new lives. Each success story felt like a validation of everything Rebecca had been through. "Are you ready for tonight?" Eleanor asked, arriving with a garment bag containing Rebecca's dress for the gala. The guest list is impressive: judges, attorneys, business leaders, and most importantly, some of the women we've helped. Rebecca had insisted that the women who had benefited from the foundation be honored guests at the gala, not just abstract success stories used for fundraising. She wanted donors to see the real faces of domestic violence survivors and understand that they were strong, intelligent women who had simply needed support to escape dangerous situations. "I'm nervous about the speech," Rebecca admitted. "Telling my story to a room full of strangers feels overwhelming." "You've told your story in courtrooms and to investigators," Sarah reminded her. "Tonight will be different because you're not seeking justice. You're offering hope." Dr. Amanda Foster knocked on the front door, arriving for Elena's scheduled checkup. She had continued as their pediatrician, and her presence had become a reassuring constant in their new life. "How's our little walker doing?" Dr. Foster asked, watching Elena cruise along the sofa with practiced ease. "She's into everything," Rebecca replied. "Yesterday I found her trying to reorganize the spice cabinet." "That's excellent," Dr. Foster said with a laugh. "Curiosity and determination are wonderful traits in a little girl." During Elena's examination, Dr. Foster brought up a topic that had been on Rebecca's mind lately. "Rebecca, have you given any thought to Elena's relationship with her father? She's going to start asking questions eventually." Rebecca had been dreading this conversation. Jonathan was serving his sentence in federal prison and had made no attempt to contact them since his conviction. Legally, he had no visitation rights due to the domestic violence conviction, but the question of how to handle Elena's questions about her father kept Rebecca awake some nights. "I want to be honest with her in age-appropriate ways," Rebecca said. "I won't lie about who he is, but I also won't burden her with adult problems." "That's a wise approach," Dr. Foster agreed. "Children need truth, but they also need security. Elena's security comes from knowing she's loved and protected, not from having perfect parents." That afternoon, Rebecca spent time at Sterling and Associates reviewing the final details for a custom engagement ring commission. The business had grown beyond Eleanor's wildest expectations, with custom design work now accounting for 60% of their revenue. "The couple wants to incorporate elements from both their grandmother's rings," Rebecca explained to Eleanor, showing her the design sketches. "It's going to be beautiful. Old diamonds in a completely new setting that represents their shared future." "You have such a gift for helping people tell their stories through jewelry," Eleanor observed. "Every piece you design seems to capture something essential about the person wearing it." Rebecca had discovered that her talent wasn't just for interior design, it was for understanding what made spaces and objects meaningful to people. The jewelry work satisfied the same creative impulses while allowing her to participate in some of life's most important moments. "Eleanor, I've been thinking about expanding the custom design service," Rebecca said. "What would you think about offering design consultations for special occasions beyond engagements? Anniversary pieces, gifts for new mothers, commemoration jewelry for life transitions?" Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Rebecca, that's brilliant. You could help women mark their own milestones instead of waiting for someone else to celebrate them." As the afternoon wore on, Rebecca prepared for the evening gala with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The Eleanor Foundation had become more than a charity. It had become a community of women supporting other women, and tonight they would celebrate their collective impact. Valerie Cooper had flown in from Seattle for the gala, bringing 18-month-old Emma with her. The two little girls played together on Rebecca's living room floor while their mothers got ready for the evening. "Can you believe how much our lives have changed?" Valerie asked, applying makeup in Rebecca's bathroom mirror. 2 years ago, we were both trapped in Jonathan's web of lies. Now look at us." "I know," Rebecca replied, styling her hair. "Sometimes I can barely remember what it felt like to be so afraid all the time." "I never want to forget," Valerie said seriously. "Not because I want to relive the pain, but because I never want to take my freedom for granted again." The gala was held at the downtown convention center, transformed for the evening into an elegant celebration space. Rebecca had worked with the event planner to ensure the decor felt empowering rather than pitying. Bold colors, inspiring quotes, and photographs of foundation beneficiaries succeeding in their new lives. When Rebecca stepped up to the podium to deliver her keynote speech, she looked out at an audience of 300 people who had gathered to support the foundation's work. Eleanor sat at the front table, beaming with pride. Sarah was nearby with her legal colleagues. Detective Patricia Hall had come with several other law enforcement officers who specialized in domestic violence cases. But most importantly, scattered throughout the audience were the women the foundation had helped, survivors who had rebuilt their lives and were now thriving. 2 years ago, Rebecca began, I thought I was living a perfect life. I had a beautiful home, financial security, and a husband who was successful and respected in our community. What I didn't realize was that I was actually living in a carefully constructed prison. She spoke about the gradual erosion of her independence, the financial control, the isolation from friends and family, and the way domestic violence had escalated during her pregnancy. The moment that changed everything wasn't when my husband hit me, Rebecca continued. It was when Eleanor Stone, a woman I had just met, looked me in the eye and told me she had witnessed what really happened. For the first time in years, someone validated my reality instead of asking me to accept lies. Rebecca paused, making eye contact with Eleanor, who was wiping away tears. That's what the Eleanor Foundation does, Rebecca said. We validate women's reality. We tell them that their experiences matter, that their safety matters, and that they deserve better. We provide practical help, but more importantly, we provide hope. She shared statistics about domestic violence, but also stories of the women they had helped. The single mother who was now a registered nurse, the teenager who had escaped an abusive boyfriend and was thriving in college, the grandmother who had left a 40-year marriage and discovered her talent for art. These women didn't need rescuing, Rebecca emphasized. They needed resources, support, and most importantly, they needed someone to believe in their strength. Every woman in an abusive relationship already knows she deserves better. Our job is to help her believe she can achieve better. The speech concluded with Rebecca's vision for the foundation's future, expanding services, providing job training, offering childcare during court proceedings, and creating a network of mentors who could guide women through the process of rebuilding their lives. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where domestic violence is not tolerated, where women's stories are believed, and where every woman knows her worth, Rebecca said in closing. That world is possible, but only if we build it together. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, and Rebecca felt overwhelmed by the response. As she left the podium, women approached her to share their own stories and express gratitude for the foundation's work. One young woman, barely out of her teens, handed Rebecca a handwritten note. Thank you for showing me that leaving was possible. I start nursing school next month, and my 2-year-old son will grow up knowing his mother chose courage over comfort. Later that evening, after the gala had ended and Elena was asleep at home, Rebecca sat in her garden with a cup of tea, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The house was quiet except for the sound of wind chimes she had hung on the back porch. Her phone buzzed with messages from gala attendees, foundation board members, and women who had seen news coverage of the event and wanted to share their own stories. Each message represented another life that might be changed, another woman who might find the courage to choose freedom. Sarah joined her in the garden, carrying her own cup of tea. How does it feel to be officially recognized as one of the city's most influential women? Rebecca laughed. Surreal. 2 years ago, I couldn't even choose my own groceries without permission. Now I'm running a foundation and giving speeches to hundreds of people. You were always capable of this, Sarah said firmly. Jonathan's abuse didn't make you weak. It just convinced you that you were weak. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of their peaceful neighborhood. Rebecca thought about Elena sleeping safely upstairs, about the foundation that would continue growing and helping women, about the business partnership with Eleanor that had exceeded all expectations. Sarah, Rebecca said eventually, do you think Jonathan ever realizes what he lost? Sarah considered the question. I think men like Jonathan are incapable of understanding what they've lost because they never understood what they had. He saw you as an asset to be managed, not a person to be loved. He can't miss something he never valued. Rebecca nodded, realizing that Jonathan's inability to appreciate her had actually been a gift in disguise. It had prevented her from being tempted to return to the familiar cage of her marriage, even when leaving felt impossible. "I'm glad he never understood my worth," Rebecca said. "If he had, I might have stayed longer, and Elena might have grown up thinking that kind of treatment was normal." "Elena is going to grow up knowing that her mother is strong, independent, and unwilling to accept less than she deserves," Sarah said. "That's the best gift you could give her." As they prepared to go inside, Rebecca's phone rang with a call from Eleanor. "I hope I'm not calling too late," Eleanor said. "I wanted to tell you how proud I am of your speech tonight. You've become an incredible advocate for women's rights." "I learned from the best," Rebecca replied. "Eleanor, none of this would have been possible without your faith in me." "Rebecca, dear, you far exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first offered you that partnership," Eleanor said. "You've taken everything we built and expanded it in ways that will help thousands of women. That's not my accomplishment. That's yours." After hanging up, Rebecca walked through her house, checking the locks and turning off lights. A nightly routine that had evolved from fear-based hypervigilance to simple responsibility for her home and daughter's safety. In Elena's room, she stood watching her daughter sleep, marveling at the peaceful expression on the little face. Elena would never know the fear that had dominated Rebecca's life during pregnancy. She would grow up seeing her mother as strong, successful, and self-sufficient. "Tomorrow we're going to start planning the foundation's second year," Rebecca whispered to her sleeping daughter. "We're going to help even more women find their strength, and you're going to grow up knowing that women can build amazing things when they support each other." Elena stirred slightly, as if approving of the plan. Rebecca's phone buzzed with one final message of the evening, this one from a woman named Jennifer, who had seen the gala coverage on the news. "I've been married to my abuser for 15 years. Tonight, watching your speech, I realized I don't have to be married to him for 16. Can you help me?" Rebecca typed back immediately. "Yes. Call the foundation tomorrow. You're not alone anymore." As she finally headed to bed, Rebecca reflected on the incredible transformation her life had undergone. She had evolved from a controlled and diminished wife to an independent business owner, foundation director, and role model for other women. But the most important transformation wasn't professional, it was personal. She had rediscovered her voice, her strength, and her capacity for authentic love. She had learned the difference between being supported and being controlled, between being cherished and being possessed. Elena would grow up with a mother who had chosen truth over comfort, freedom over security, and hope over fear. She would learn that women could build their own success, support each other through difficult times, and create change in the world. Rebecca turned off the bedroom light and settled into bed, already planning the next day's foundation work and looking forward to watching Elena continue her fearless exploration of the world. For the first time in her adult life, Rebecca fell asleep without fear, without anxiety about tomorrow, and without doubt about her own worth and capabilities. The last thing she saw before sleep was the small sign on her nightstand, a gift from Eleanor. She believed she could, so she did. It was the perfect summary of a life rebuilt from courage, determination, and the support of women who understood that empowering each other was the key to empowering themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new women to help. But tonight, Rebecca Matthews slept peacefully, knowing that she and Elena were building exactly the life they both deserved.